All right.
Okay. Can you hear me, Mav?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, Ella. Good
All right.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mav, and welcome once again. Okay. Welcome everyone. For I think we have just a very few persons here joining from Twitch, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So we already have Mr. Marvelous here who's taking us onto this class. So please, if you're either joining on YouTube or Twitch or via LinkedIn, please do well to drop a message on Discord so we'll have more persons joining. Yeah, Marvelous, can you hear me? So you can
Yes.
start. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay. So, yeah, I think we can also, drop a reminder for those of us that are on the call and you're probably joining from, Discord. Maybe you can drop a reminder for the others, so that they can also, show up and learn from this class. All right. So, um, yeah, it's weekend, and today we are going to be covering AWS monitoring and optimization. All right, AWS monitoring and optimization. We're going to be having most of the hands-on session, in the workshop, right? So we're basically going to cover, some of the details, some of the things you need to know, some of the things you need to understand. And I will also show a couple of examples, especially around, setting up and monitoring a sample serverless service. Okay, so we'd use AWS, but would use a third-party solution, which I would explain and I will show you how it's done, right? So if you are with us, please go ahead and drop a message in the chat so that we are sure that you can hear me. All right. Okay, so please drop a message in the chat. Once I see the first message in the chat, I will continue. I will just move straight into the details. All right, so I can see we have three people probably watching from YouTube. Drop a message in the chat, so that I can jump into the contents. Okay. All right, I think we had to do that ourselves. Okay, so that's from John. Hi, John. John Michael. All right, nice. So I think I can proceed now. So welcome. And when we talk about AWS monitoring and optimization, I think it's quite straightforward from the description here, right? How do we get to set up monitoring, right? And observability. How do we monitor our services, right? Some of these resources, we create a new service running on AWS. How do we set up monitoring, right? And how do we also optimize some of these services, especially around costs? How do we optimize the cost? How do we optimize the performance? How do we scale? So we're going to discuss some of these things. Not every single thing you should know. Of course, there are advanced patterns, right? But at least looking at the fundamentals, you should be able to understand most of the details. Through some of the explanations we'll give here. All right. So this material will be shared with you. We're going to be talking about the basics of the cloud infrastructure, right? And we'll then talk about AWS Global Network, the service offerings. We will also talk about some reasons, why monitoring and optimization, is very important, right? So we'll talk about that, as well as we'll talk about resource scaling. We'll talk about some of the monitoring tools. Of course, we have covered this in a previous session that I think I taught that class. Yeah, that's correct. And we talked about CloudWatch, CloudTrail. We'll also talk about AWS config. We'll talk about cost management and the rest. Okay, so let me just jump into some details here, right? So speaking about the cloud infrastructure, this is something you've covered already. We know that AWS has a is very vast, and of course, it has a globally distributed cloud computing platform. So, of course, it's fundamental that we understand some of these things, starting with the regions and availability zones. All right. So, AWS operates in multiple geographic regions, right? And if you already have an AWS account, of course, you would have seen some of these things, US is one, US is two, so that is basically referring to the regions, right? And these regions then consist of availability zones. If you don't have any idea on these things I am saying, I think you should probably reference some of the existing classes, right? I am sure we have already discussed some of these things, okay? And these availability zones are essentially the data centers with redundant power, right? And networking and of course cooling infrastructures. Okay. So when you create a particular service, it's definitely created in one of these data centers. Most times, based on, of course, based on the region you have selected. Okay. So let's talk about the global network. So basically, the idea is, you are not deploying this in a physical location, at least not in your location, right? Not in your own space, which is the point of the cloud in the first place, right? So when you're deploying on the global network, the idea is, you have access to, powerful, compute and storage or networking infrastructures, right? So these infrastructures are designed for low latency, and of course you have high bandwidth connectivity, and it's ideal to also understand these network capabilities so that it will be easier for you to optimize data transfer and your application performance. All right. So as regards the service offering, we understand that AWS covers, they provide a vast array of services, right? So from computing, storage, database, so I'm sure we also covered this already when we say compute service, such as EC2, storage service such as S3, right? Database services such as DynamoDB, DocumentDB, and lots more, right? Machine learning services, Amazon SageMaker. We have a bunch of services that they provide, which makes that it gives you that access to most of the things you will need, and all you should be concerned about is setting it up the right way and basically paying for what you use, in most of the cases, because you have the pay as you go offering, right? Which is, of course, one of the fundamental cloud pricing models. Okay. So, yeah, you just have to choose what is best for your workload. All right. So the benefits, or I would say the importance, right? The importance of monitoring and optimization is basically, being able to manage these AWS resources effectively, right? And when we talk about why exactly does it matter, we are focusing on cost efficiency, performance, and scaling, right? These are at the core some of the things we actually talk about, right? So cost efficiency is important. You don't want to end up spinning up something that you would pay for when you did not plan that budget, right? So you end up waking up one morning and you see that you have a budget of about $500 or so, and you did not plan that, right? So of course, when there's poor planning and poor monitoring, you get to accumulate costs without necessarily um, knowing what is happening, right? Because of course there was no plan, right? There was no budgeting, so you will not even get an alert or something, right? So we'll talk about some of those things now. AWS services can become very expensive. If you don't manage it carefully, definitely it's going to become very expensive. So, monitoring the resources that you spin up would allow you to identify the cost saving opportunities, and of course, it will allow you to learn, or, basically select the right sizing instance, right? So you'll be able to manage the unused resources, which means if you notice that maybe at a specific time of the day, your resource is not being used very well, and you're paying for it because it's on and it's basically um, online. You should be able to optimize to say, okay, I want some sort of scaling, right? At this point, scale down. At this point, scale up, right? So, yeah, when we talk about cost efficiency, you would definitely uh, be talking about, or be thinking about, how best to optimize the data transfer cost. All right, and for performance improvements, of course, we all like performance. We all like a situation where your resources are responding, as fast as possible. Um, Probably, with the best response time out there. Okay, so in order to ensure optimal performance, it's of course vital That yeah, so I would say it is very important, right? It is very important that you are delivering a seamless user experience, in your products. If you have an application that is slow, obviously users will be, users will not be, they will not have the best time, using your solution. If it's a mobile app, if it's a web app, if you host a web app on AWS and you probably um, you probably did not set the right maybe the right instance or the right compute power or the right storage. It will be very difficult if you're not monitoring. It will be very difficult for you to notice, right? If you're not monitoring. Remember when we covered the cloud watch, right? We covered the CloudWatch training. I was showing a couple of things on, that relates to some graphs that you can use to monitor the performance, right, of your applications. If you don't have those dashboards properly implemented, it will be difficult for you to understand what your customers are actually saying, because most times the customers might not even complain to you directly. It might be slow for them, right? The times you test, it might be better for you, and then you assume that everybody is also getting the same experience as you. Meanwhile, it is probably not that way. Okay, so it's better to at least make sure you set up monitoring for performance improvement. All right. And of course, you also set up monitoring, for resource scaling. So you can set up, monitoring to say, okay, I want to observe this service. If at any point in time, this requests, the request coming in is actually increasing, um, we can auto scale, right? We can auto scale. So looking at what we have here, AWS makes it easy to scale resources up and down on demand. And effective monitoring enables auto scaling and load balancing, ensuring that your application can handle um, varying workloads efficiently. All right, I think that should be effectively, but yeah, efficiently. Okay, so now over to the monitoring tools. Uh, I have already explained this in the previous class, right? I have explained this in the previous class. We covered CloudWatch, we covered CloudTrail. So what I did here was just, I came up with kind of like a description of some of the things you can do with these services. Okay, so CloudWatch, for example, we know CloudWatch is primarily for monitoring the services, right, that you set up on AWS. So you can use it to monitor those resources and applications, and of course you can then track what is actually happening. You can track the performance, you can track the bandwidth, you can track a bunch of things using CloudWatch. All right, and of course you can also take logs. Remember we experimented with this, and I think we combined, if I can remember clearly, we combined AWS Lambda alongside AWS API Gateway. Okay, and we're able to see the request and of course the log as well. We're able to see those details in the logs, all right, in the log groups. Okay, so if you are not in that class, please reference that specific class. I'm sure you will learn a lot from that specific session. Okay, so CloudWatch is a powerful monitoring service that provides insight to your AWS resources and applications. All right, and it offers a comprehensive monitoring for AWS services. It allows you collect and track metrics, and it of course allows you collect and monitor log files, right? And even set alarms. You set alarms to say if this happens or if we get to this point, please trigger a notification and send it to my email, right? Using SES. Okay. Yeah. So AWS SES is also a service, right, on AWS for email service, an email service, so simple email service. Okay, so the amazing thing about AWS is it's very easy to actually connect, some of these services that they provide. So you can actually connect, SES to CloudWatch, you can connect SNS, you can connect a bunch of services actually, and it makes a lot of sense. It gives you that flexibility, to connect to connect a specific trigger that you want, to an event, to an event on your AWS account. Okay. All right. So when it comes to creating custom metrics, you can basically create a custom metrics to monitor specific aspects of your application's performance. allowing for fine-grained monitoring. So if you remember clearly, we were able to track things like bandwidth, right? So yeah, using CloudWatch, you can actually create, specific. You can create, metrics to monitor specific aspects of your application's performance. Okay. Yeah, and of course, alarms and notification. As I said earlier, you can set up alarms to get notified when specific metrics breach. When it actually gets to that defined threshold. All right. So, which means I say, if this gets to a specific, threshold or a limit, please, send this, call this specific trigger and send this message to this email, or do this, right, or do that next. Okay. So it's very customizable, and you have access to do some of these things from your dashboard, okay, from the cloud console. So speaking about logs, I mentioned this already. So, but the idea is you are able to connect and monitor log data, and it will definitely help you with troubleshooting. If there's an issue, you want to track where this problem is coming from. You can look through the logs, right? So CloudWatch gives you that log, kind of like a log aggregation feature, right? So you are able to go through the logs and gain insights to your application's behavior. All right. Okay, so and the next thing we have here is Cloud Trail. All right, so let me take a look at the charts if we have any questions. Okay, so I hope you guys, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chats. We'll definitely go through a quick example of working with AWS Lambda and checking out some of the monitoring feedback. We're not going to be using the AWS console itself. I'm going to show you a third-party tool that we use most times. Um, if you are a serverless developer, you probably get to use that, or use some of these tools in the future. All right. So yeah. So back to the slide, um, or back to the PDF. This is not necessarily a slide. So yeah. Okay. So CloudTrail. And I think we also discussed this in the other session as well. So, but basically, this would help you track the changes and the actions taken within your AWS account. So, I mentioned that it's mostly around compliance, right? You're trying to know who did this or who did that. Okay, so you are tracking the API calls and changes. Now, with CloudTrail, you can log API calls and changes, made to different AWS resources, and this would of course help you maintain and audit the trail, and of course this would eventually ensure accountability within your environment, right? So you have your cloud organization, for example, your AWS organization, and then you allocate the right permissions to the right set of people, maybe from different departments. It can be your testing department, your developer department, I meant development department, and your cloud engineers or DevOps engineers. If you want to know who did what, of course, CloudTrail, tells you, okay, this person called this or this person did that, right? Yeah, you can reference the previous session we had, talking about CloudTrail and CloudWatch, and I'm sure you would see an example. All right. So, yeah, this would also help you, when it comes to security and compliance. So, it plays a crucial role in security and compliance by providing visibility into who is doing what within your AWS organization. Basically what we have said, several times already. All right. And speaking of AWS config, I don't think we touched on this in the previous class, but basically it's just going to, it provides a detailed view of the configuration of your AWS resources. All right. So it can give you the, config history, right, of those resource configurations, and it also allows you to track changes over time. Okay. So this can also be used for compliance checks, right? So you can define rules for compliance checks to ensure that your AWS resources, would maintain or adhere to specific configuration and security standards, within your organization or within your industry. All right. So that is actually a good way to set up, some of these things. And of course, this is also part of monitoring, because yeah, you're basically monitoring your AWS organization or your AWS resources. Okay, so it's definitely part of your monitoring and optimization strategy. All right. And speaking of cost management. So this is the point where we actually get to optimization, right? So you're trying to ensure, and of course with monitoring as well, but more of the optimization. How can I optimize my resources in such a way that it will be cost effective, right? For my organization. Okay, so you have AWS Cost Explorer. And basically, the Explorer offers a comprehensive view of your AWS cost and the usage, right? And when we talk about the cost and usage analysis, which is under the Cost Explorer, as you can see, this is a feature that would analyze your past and current AWS usage and spending to identify trend and patterns. So it can basically tell you, based on your last usage, you spent maybe $200 or $300, and based on our forecast, this is basically your next cost by the end of the month. So it's kind of giving you a forecast, projection, basically identifying trends and patterns, and using that to give you meaningful insights about your spending, right? And of course, as you can see, I already mentioned forecasting. So this is the forecasting cost. So this would use the Cost Explorer to forecast your AWS costs, helping you plan and budget effectively. All right. So what is AWS budgets? Now, AWS budgets would allow you to set cost and usage budgets for your AWS resources. So you are basically creating budgets and setting cost alerts, right? When you're creating a budget, you're basically defining a budget for specific accounts, services, or resource groups to say that this is what I want to spend at the end of the month for this. Okay, and you get the right feedbacks if it's probably going to exceed that, or if the resources you are basically deploying, is beyond that budget, you will definitely be informed. Okay, and the cost alert is a way to set a specific amount, maybe let's say 50 or $100, to say that I have some services and this is my this is what I want to spend. And the moment it gets beyond this, please let me know so I can know what next to do. So you use the cost alert to set such a notification, right? So if anything happens and your budget, you're already going above budget, the resources are going above budget, that alert will be triggered, and you will be notified that your spending has just exceeded the projected budgets. All right. So we have the AWS Trust Advisor, and the AWS Trust Advisor would basically offer recommendations for cost optimization and security best practices. So if there's something you're not doing right, based on the AWS standards, the Trust Advisor would inform you and say, okay, this is not right. This is not very good, and this is not the best practice. So it's up to you as the organization owner or the admin or the cloud admin to implement some of these, to make sure you meet this, best practices, right? So it's actually a very handy, service. It helps you, to ensure you're following, these best practices, which can help improve, the security in your organization, right? So it gives you recommendations for cost optimization. It provides suggestions for reducing costs by identifying underutilized resources and recommending, reserved instances. Okay, and when it comes to the security best practices, it provides you with security details and information, by identifying potential security vulnerabilities and recommending actions to address them. All right. So when we talk about performance optimization, we have auto scaling, and of course, you guys might have heard a lot of cloud developers or engineers mention this several times. Auto scaling, auto scaling, auto scaling. Whether you are on Azure, AWS, Google, which is GCP, or even IBM Cloud, or Alibaba Cloud, no matter the cloud platform you're using, auto scaling should at least be a thing, right? You want to be able to scale, your resource if the usage, goes beyond your expectation. I mean, it's something that can be optional, but in most cases, you want to do that. You don't want your servers to go down. You don't want your customers to have a bad time, right? Accessing your websites or your services. So auto scaling should be a thing. It allows you to automatically adjust the number of compute resource based on the traffic or workload, which means you can scale up or you can scale down. Okay, so you have that dynamic resource scaling, and it can basically add or remove instances to match the traffic demand, right? So this would ensure that you have an efficient resource utilization on your resource, okay, on that specific service that you're using, okay. Um, yeah, so we have load balancers and auto scaling groups. So this would combine auto scaling with elastic load balancing, which is your ELB, right? And so yeah, we're basically combining this for fault tolerance and seamless scaling, right? So a load balancer, I've explained this before as well, but you basically have it sit in front of your let's use for example EC2, right? That's an example. Your EC2, which is a compute service, you have like three EC2 machines running your application, and now you put a load balancer in front to say, if the services, if the traffic is coming in, please look for the load balancer will do the job in the first place, right? It's going to look through the three machines to say, okay, this one has a lot of traffic, this one has a lot of traffic, this one probably has less traffic. So I'm going to send this network request into this one, right? Because it has less traffic. So there are patterns and there are algorithms for this. I think one of the most popular option out there is the round robin algorithm. So it basically looks through and say, okay, allocate one to this, allocate another to this, allocate another request to the third item. So it keeps going back and forth, just circulating the load across multiple resources that are connected to the load balancer. So load balancing is great, right? And connecting your load balancing and your auto scaling group is basically going to give you, a fault tolerance and seamless scaling setup right in the cloud. Okay, so to talk about elastic load balancing, in itself. So basically, elastic load balancing would distribute incoming application traffic across multiple targets. Very similar to what I just explained. Okay, and you have the different types of load balancers. AWS offers um, application load balancer and network load balancer, and each of these are actually designed for specific use cases. Okay, so when you join the workshop, come with these questions. We'll definitely talk about the several use cases and when you use application load balancers and when you also use the network load balancers. Okay, so yeah, you can also configure and optimize this load balancer, right? It's important that you do this so that you can properly distribute traffic. You can efficiently distribute this traffic, right? And of course, in the end, you ensure high availability. Okay. All right. So speaking of AWS Lambda optimization, now AWS Lambda is a seamless, it's a serverless compute service, right? And of course, I'm going to also make you understand one thing. When using AWS Lambda, the benefit you get is the ability to quickly spin up functions, right? You can spin up several functions to perform different tasks. You don't have to manage any server. This is automatically managed by, it's a managed service, obviously, and this is automatically managed by AWS. Falls under the category of what we call function as a service, right? You set up functions, you run these functions when needed. When they are not running, they are basically turned off, so you don't have to pay for it when it's not working. All right, and yeah, you can also set up some optimizations, right? Now there's something called a cold start. Cold start is saying, okay, this was actually turned off, for a while, and it's basically coming up to execute that initial, request that came in. If you have other requests coming in simultaneously, then obviously it's going to be up for a while until it's done performing those performing the actions on those requests. But when there's no request coming in, it goes off, right? So that's that moment where it kind of like comes up, it's spinning up. That's actually a cold start. So you need to understand and mitigate, cold start times to ensure, responsive serverless application. So it's something you learn to also, optimize. And in the workshop, when we'll talk about AWS Lambda and serverless functions, we'll talk about this. Okay. Memory and timeout configurations. All right, so you can actually adjust, memory and the timeout settings for your Lambda functions to optimize the performance and the resource usage. Okay, um, yeah, and we have module 5, security and compliance. All right, so we have also covered AWS identity and access management. I had a class, I think there was a class where I actually taught this, and I'm sure some other instructors have mentioned this as well. IAM, which is the short form of Identity and Access Management, is a critical component for managing access to your AWS resources in a secure way. Okay, so we have role-based access control, we have security policies. We mentioned this. I mentioned policies when I was explaining X3, right? S3, simple storage, right? So basically, it's a simple storage service, okay? And you can also, apply the security policies to basically any AWS resource you have out there, all right? So role-based access control is a way to implement, you know, um, or grant permission, based on job functions, right? So you are able to create specific roles and say, okay, this role should be able to do this set of things. So you allocate the set of resources or the set of permissions that this role should be able to do, right? Security policies is basically, a way to define or enforce, these permissions, by specifically setting up those, you know, um, policies, right? So you kind of attach these policies. So the way it works is you are basically enforcing, the permissions, for specific users and specific resources, right? Not primarily, focusing on the role per se, but of course, these things are intertwined. All right. Yeah. So, and by the time we talk about this in the workshop, you would also learn, the practical usage of these things. We have a class where I actually explained and I showed an example, but we would also cover this in the workshops, right? Um, all right, so we have the security groups and we have the network. So basically NACLs, talking about network security, right? Network security and network configurations. Okay, so yeah, and of course these things are essential for network and access, right? Access into your services or your resources. Okay, so one thing you should understand is you can actually configure a security group to say, okay, I want to be able to have this particular resource this particular item or this particular service communicate to this other service, right? I want to be able to block access, to a specific IP range, or to a specific resource. Okay, so we use the security group, coupled with the network security configurations to allow inbound and the outbound traffic, right? So this is also a way to make sure you have a good, security configuration around your, AWS resources. And of course, most times it is, very important you even set this up before they can even accept, before these resources can even accept traffic. So by default on AWS, most of this by default most of the configuration is you don't even have access until you decide to give access. So by default you are blocked, right? Until you decide to give access, which is a good way, to help. It will definitely help, cloud engineers, because if you are giving access by default, you can imagine a lot of people forgetting to set these things, and you have your resources exposed, to threats out there. Okay, compliance monitoring, and this is something I've also mentioned this in the past. We actually said so many things around compliance, but yeah. So basically, you have services like AWS Inspector that you can use to basically assess the security and compliance, and even kind of like um, track and check, for situations where you might have not met the standards. Okay, so it's kind of like giving you that assessment of those resources and your applications to see if they are meeting the standard compliance regulations, or yeah, basically the compliance configurations that you've set, right? Or that AWS have also set, as a standard. Okay, so you're also checking for best practices. Um, yeah. So these are some of the details. These are some of the details, and we're going to be having hands-on labs. These are examples of things we're going to be doing. We're going to set up CloudWatch alarms. We're going to set up budgets and alerts. We're going to configure auto scaling for EC2 instances. This material will be shared with you, and these are some of the things we'll be doing in the workshop. The details of the workshop will be out this week, at least by tomorrow. The reason for the delay is we actually wanted you guys to finish up with your regular classes. So with the remaining time we have, I'm going to jump to I'm going to share my entire screen and I will show you. Okay, so someone said, let me see some of the questions here. Lola is asking, what do you mean by serverless developer? All right, so we have you can on the cloud we have what we call serverless, right? So basically there are so many resources, or so many so many resources are provided by some of these cloud providers. I think I would call them services here. So for example, you have Lambda. Lambda is a serverless service. You have DynamoDB, right? Serverless DB. You have AWS Aurora, which have serverless features and functionality. So you have a bunch of services that are serverless, and then we now have this domain of experts, who are serverless engineers, right? So they basically get to use serverless technologies to build applications, and for example, Top Universe has all the API requests we make when you're creating an account, or you're registering for something. We mostly use serverless functions, and I'll be sharing that right now. I want you to see some of the. We have a lot of serverless platforms and serverless resources out there, right? As a matter of fact, I do a lot of serverless computing, and engineering, right? So let me share the entire window I have here. Give me a minute to do this. All right, so I think this is it. So share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to have to present my entire screen so that you guys can see. All right. So yeah, I might have to be switching because I'm actually connected to a single screen for today. So basically what you're seeing on my screen here, this is serverless.com, all right? And I am currently logged into an environment where of course, you can see a lot of serverless stuffs here, right? These are basically applications. You can also see another, application here. This is amped.dev. It's new. And with this, I can simply create, new applications that would run uh, um, they will run on the cloud, but of course it's serverless, right? So whether it's a front end or a JavaScript Express.js application, I can set this up, by simply clicking, just a few clicks. I'm currently deploying this on AWS EU Central One, which is Frankfurt. That's the region I've selected. I'm deploying this to AWS right now. I can set a repository name and call this Top Universe Amps serverless. That's okay. And once I click on deploy, this is deploying automatically, to a public repository on my GitHub account because I already created an account. Okay. So this is currently deploying. We're deploying an application right now. It's as simple as just clicking around, a few clicks basically. And this is because of the service we're using, right? Our repository has been created. It's configuring, the deployment. It will then create a production environment and it will deploy, right? And this will just take a few seconds or minutes at times. So that is, one way to actually build and deploy serverless applications. We're going to test this. You would see that this is working. So if you come to me and you say, Marv, I want you to build a simple app that kind of like a QR code application, or maybe some sort of URL shortener or something, right? Even if it's a front end application, I can just set this up and give you an application in less than 5 to 10 minutes, and I have the environment set up, right? And I can spend the rest of my time just hacking things around to make sure that I have I have the functionality that I need. All right. Now this is one, and I started using this recently. This just launched this month, if I'm not mistaken. This month, they went public this month. They've been building this for a very long time, so it's very new, right? As you can see, I have the repository URL, I have my production URL, which means I can literally visit this page and I would see my application running, right? I have my Node.js application running, and of course, I can choose to start, editing or configuring this stuff. I can visit the URL, and of course, I can clone this to also see what exactly the code base looks like, right? This is public. I set this to be public. So this is my code base, as you can see. And of course, this is on my account. I can clone this, and I can basically choose to, work with this. So if I say git clone, let me zoom in to make sure you see this very well. All right, so this is cloned. Let's do Z plus blah 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 AMPT. Okay, so I have my application that I just created. This is the static index of HTML stuff you saw out there, and this is our index, page, right? So of course I can configure this. I can edit the code. This is saying hello from the public part. So in order to see what this would look like, if I go back here and I click on this guy, so this is the home page. When I say slash hello, so you would see, I think was that hello or maybe slash API slash hello. I would have to verify that. Oh yeah, it's slash API slash hello. So you see we have hello from the public part, right? Or from the public API. Okay, that's exactly what you saw in the code. So we can change this, right? We can change this, and of course we have a documentation to work with. So it's quite simple for us, right? So for example, how do you make changes and deploy? Let's click on the docs. All right, so now we have clicked on the docs, and you're basically seeing what this looks like. So your applications, you have your applications running, and I'm sure you can deploy by just running AMPT deploy, right? It should be as simple as that, because I am already logged in on my computer. So right now I can simply say I think it's AMPT, correct? So this will basically load this, on my local environment. As you can see, it is trying to load this application, right? So it is updating the CLI. This may take a few minutes. I don't have that time. Okay, let's see what is happening here. So we have an error. This is an access error. So maybe I will just append sudo for now. Yeah, just for this session, so we can have that work. So it's updating the CLI, and this is currently loading. So remember, you guys are actually, do you want to create a new app? Nope. So I don't want to create a new app. I was actually expecting that I could. Oh, I am not in that repository. So let's go into the repository and let's do that, AMPT. So yeah, remember that you're not really software engineers, except you want to code, right? Ideally, what you should be doing is, deploying and setting up infrastructure. But yeah, I mean, it's a good one if you know how to code, which is why we taught you Python to start. All right. So this is currently installing the project dependencies, it's synchronizing with what we have online, and after a while, this will be running locally. So I can make changes, and when I make changes, we can deploy. So I can change this to, hello from Magic. So let's just have Magic right here. I'm going to save this. So now I have this saved. So right here, you see this is currently running. We can basically visit our dashboard to see what is happening. We can test this, but I simply want to run AMPT deploy, right? So let's deploy what we currently have. And I hope this is the right command for this. So yeah, deploying to production, deploying to Frankfurt. This was what we selected. And right now, you see, we're actually using AWS, but not directly, using a third-party solution, right? And we also have similar, we have something similar using the serverless framework I'll be showing you very soon. So yeah, just let's give this a few seconds to complete. All right, so this is deploying to production, and I think it's almost done. Let me check the charts. Okay, we don't have any message for now. So basically what we're doing right now is serverless development. This has been deployed, so we can simply check to see the exact changes. So if I say API slash hello, let's see what has changed. So now you see we have hello from Magic. So we're basically building an application, right? We're not going to dive into details because of time. That is just an example of how you can deploy your application to AWS. But now we have another example right here. So this is me connected to my AWS instance. I have different applications here, Top Universe. This is what I just created. This is our serverless stuff. We see we have a bunch of things here basically. All right. So what exactly can we do? All right. So this is called serverless. Let me show you an example. If I should click on this, click on dev, you're going to see, a way to Yeah, hello. I am really sorry about that. That was definitely my network. Apologies, guys. Okay, I can see the messages, no audio, no video. Yeah. I don't know. My network just got tripped, and yeah, I'm back. So please, if you can hear me, drop a message in the chat, so that I can be sure that we are communicating. Apologies. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, please let me know. I hope this doesn't happen again, but I'm going to just ace through the remaining thing here. So what I was trying to show you guys was this serverless platform. So as you can see, I have a simple application here deployed 47 minutes ago, and I will show you how to create something new. So let me click on Create App. I'll be fast. You see, we can create even Python applications, Flask applications, HTTP application, an application, Python Flask with DynamoDB. We have even cron jobs, right? Basically scheduled jobs. So we can basically create a new Express application app. We can call this Top Universe Class 2 app, for example. And I can create this. This is connected to my AWS account, which means I can basically see this thing happening in CloudWatch if I choose to check. So I'm going to go one step back, and let's create this by pasting this guy here. I'm going to use sudo just because of the permission thing. So control, that will not work. Come on, clear, 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 clear. Come on, go ahead. Okay, so let's use this and paste, right? Put in the password. And then I have, oh, that was a mistake. So I put in the password. And then I have my application, my application will be created, right? It will be initialized. And this is currently using serverless, right? Well, this is using serverless framework. And of course, the serverless CLI. The other one was using the AMPT CLI, with the, connected to the AMPT platform. Cloudflare also has serverless. You have Cloudflare Wrangler, right? You have MongoDB has, serverless offerings. A lot of platforms have serverless offerings, okay? So, now we're not using the AWS CLI, but rather we're using the serverless CLI to communicate with AWS to create our AWS serverless functions, which is our AWS Lambda functions, right? So now we have created a simple application. The application is being initialized, connected to our organization, Solomon Marvel 97. We're downloading the templates, and after downloading the template, you will have your code, which you can of course make changes to, connect to other dependencies, and eventually deploy, to AWS with a single command. Once you're done, right? So yeah, so it's asking if I want to deploy now. I can just say yes, I want to deploy. If I choose to check the environment where my code was created, so let's go to desktop and let's go into class. Then we would find the Top Universe Class 2 app, which is this, right? As you can see. So I can just move this into Z. So let's open this in Z. And now you see we have our code, right? Hello from root, hello from path, not found. And you can basically create new code files, modules, and basically work with this. So I can change this to hello from Magic on serverless framework, right? So this is on the root part. So I can save this, and I can say hello from Magic. Okay, on the okay. Let's just leave it this way on path. So now I have this application with a little bit of changes. I can proceed to, let's see what we have here. So this is still deploying, right? What it's doing is basically setting up the AWS account integration into serverless framework observability. It's setting up the CloudFormation stack. So this uses CloudFormation to set up the stack, just like what I explained in the previous class as well. The other class I had with you guys, right? And once this is done, it's going to deploy this to AWS, and we can also see these details on AWS. We're not going to check, right? But we can definitely see those details on AWS. So let's wait for a while, and this would be completely set up. Yeah, so by the way, if you have questions, let me check the chat. All right, no questions yet. So this actually takes longer time compared to, and the reason why this is taking longer time is because it's actually connecting to your account, right? The other sample I showed you did not really connect to your specific account. You pay, you pay to use, the things you get there, but it's not connecting to your own account. So you don't really have to do anything on the cloud. You just go in there, set up what you want, and you deploy. It is deployed to the cloud, obviously deployed to AWS, but it is not in your cloud organization, so you don't get to see details. Now, this is deployed to our AWS account, and we have the functions to basically deploy the changes we've made. I use this a lot to build a lot of applications, right? We're talking about APIs are currently built with this. So I'm currently trying to deploy to run this, and it says, yeah, I am not in. Let's get into the ways. No, that is public class app 2, yeah. So I'm going to run this again inside that directory. Let's go back to home here. So you're going to see what we have created, which is this. Let's click on this. So now this is being packaged, right? And the moment we deploy and we start invoking the functions, you will basically see the function events, which is, of course, your monitoring. You will basically see the function latency. Now, most of these monitoring details are, of course, coming from AWS, the AWS API, and of course, your detail that you've already added here. So I have added my AWS organization here from the settings. I am not going to open that here, but it's as simple as just including some of the keys you get from AWS, right? I'll show you how to do that in the workshop, so make sure you are there. So based on the changes I have added, this is currently updating my CloudFormation stack, and this will take a while. Hopefully, we should be able to finish up because it's already 1 p.m. So this would actually take a while, maybe about 2-3 minutes, I guess. And the moment it is done, we should be able to access those parts and get those feedback, and of course we can also explore, to see what is happening behind the scene, on our function. We can change the time for the metrics we want to see. We can explore the functions. We can see more details about the API, more details about deployment. We can interact with the API and also get to include keys, right? Keys like secret keys, so we call that parameters here. Okay, so this has been deployed. That was pretty fast. So let's go ahead and, follow through on the endpoints. All right, so this says hello from Magic on the serverless framework. And of course, I can include /path, which would say hello from Magic on path. So this is an easy way, to set up serverless applications. And if we refresh this, let's refresh this, we should at least see some function invocation. This might take a while to show here, but yeah, it would eventually show after a while. So let's go under the explore section. Let's see if we can track any invocation. So it's going to take a while, as I said earlier. Let's click on this. Let's see. Okay. So basically, we don't have to. Let's go back to the overview. All right. So this would definitely take a while. I'm going to probably run this again. Probably in a private tab. Let's do that in a private tab. Right. Hmm. All right. So, I mean, based on my experience using this, sometimes it can actually take a while, for these details to be populated, right? And of course, you probably have to use it for a while. But yeah, this is basically, oh, yeah, it's just came up. So you see, as I said, it will take a while. It just came up. And as you can see, we have 3 invocations, and the 3 of them were successful. There were no errors. And it actually took a while before it came in here, but it eventually came in. And of course, you can see, the charts, the latency, charts being populated as well. So you have latency, you have the invocation events, and yeah, you can also dive into Explorer. You can use the metrics bar here to basically show the metrics, right? And if you just want to view the metrics, based on the timing. So there are so many things you're going to learn. There's so many things I'm going to teach you. I think at the end of the day, it's about you being available to learn. Okay. We have a lot of platforms, that when you learn how to use these things, of course, you become smarter by the day. You get to see how things actually work, within and outside AWS. But of course, around the boundaries of cloud engineering. and you can also choose to extend your knowledge even beyond, what we're doing internally or what we're doing during the training. But this is hands-on, and I hope you'll attend the workshops. I'll see you next time. All right. Thank you very much, Amaka. That's all from me.
Bring me up now. Hi, Mav. Thank you so much for the session. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can
Hello,
hear
can you
you.
hear
We
me?
can hear you. We
Oh,
can
all
hear
right.
you.
So, thank you so much for the session. I believe we have learned a lot. So, guys, go ahead and fill your attendance. Regarding the workshop, you'll be alerted on the server, on the Discord server. So that will be all for now. See you in the evening. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Mav. Bye.